In one of the wildest and most unknown corners of North America, nature writes its own law, transforming with each season into a spectacle of life and resilience. In the far northwest of Canada, where the land meets the vast and untamed Alaska, lies an immense and enigmatic territory. Here, in this almost untouched space of more than 500,000 square kilometers, lies a diversity of more than 400 forms of wildlife. This place is the Yukon. Most of its surface is covered by mountain ranges, boreal forests, river valleys, and tundra zones. It is a territory where winter prevails for long months, with temperatures dropping below 30 degrees below zero, posing a constant challenge to the animals that inhabit it. However, when the short summer arrives, the region is completely transformed. The snow recedes, the rivers are freed from ice, and life awakens after months of silence, unfolding in a natural movement full of energy. It is during this period that one of the Yukon's most impressive phenomena occurs: mass migrations that transform the landscape. Prominent among these migrations is that of the porcupine caribou, one of the most resilient and mobile subspecies in the northern hemisphere. This migration, one of the longest among land mammals, winds its way across rugged mountains and icy rivers, through swamps that swallow the weak, and across plains devoid of shelter, whipped by a wind that cuts through the skin. The terrain devours the travelers, hunger erodes their strength, and the deep snow digs into their paws, slowing every step, punishing the most exhausted. Adding to these punishments are predators. Wolves stalk the pack, searching tirelessly and mercilessly, attacking those who straggle behind. Behind them, scavengers follow closely behind the pack, waiting for those who fall from exhaustion. In that last line, where the weakest and most wounded crawl, the migration becomes a silent graveyard. But it's not just caribou that migrate. Pacific salmon swim up the fast-moving currents and shallow passages in the rivers of this border region with Alaska, while bears and eagles wait for the opportunity to attack with precision and brutality. Nothing stays still in the Yukon. Everything changes, everything migrates. This relentless logic pushes species to the limit and reveals an essential truth: survival is not enough. We must move, anticipate, resist. How does life endure in such a ruthless setting? The answers are written in every season, on every route traced by instinct and necessity, in every creature that defies cold, hunger, and distance. A world in motion where the landscape is a protagonist and each migration a story of struggle and transformation. Welcome to the Yukon, a territory where every step, every journey is a test of endurance and adaptation. As winter approaches, the story focuses on one of the region's most resilient creatures, the porcupine caribou. With a robust build and long legs designed to cross snowy terrain, this nomadic mammal, capable of reaching up to 1 meter in height, is built to travel great distances in search of food, crossing mountains, frozen rivers, and open plains. In the vast expanses of northwestern Canada and northeastern Alaska, their primary food source is the lichens, mosses, and grasses that thrive beneath the snow, taking advantage of every available resource to sustain themselves until spring arrives. From November to late April, the herds range across vast regions of the Yukon and Alaska, conserving energy to endure the longest and most demanding season, a movement determined by their population size. With more than 200,000 individuals in their peak years, the herd is the largest in North America. But this density comes at a cost. Even before winter is over, the most accessible forage begins to become scarce. Tracks multiply in the hard snow, and the ground, marked by hundreds of hooves, barely conceals the remains of dried lichen. Some animals dig persistently, removing the white layer until they find only frozen earth. On the horizon, flocks of crows circle overhead, alert for any opportunity. The lichens are consumed faster than they can regenerate, and in the most damaged areas, the ground is left bare when the snow melts. The place that sustained the group for months is no longer sufficient for them or for other animals that depend on the same resources. It's time to move, and they will do so together, like a living stream moving in search of greener pastures. As spring progresses, the change in the Yukon is gradual but profound. The sun remains above the horizon longer, and the average temperature slowly rises, melting the layers of ice that covered rivers and lakes. Melting snow not only transforms the landscape, it also renews the quality of the available food. Plants that sprout in the northernmost latitudes have much greater nutritional value than the dried remains that still persist in winter areas. This contrast acts as a powerful incentive, and caribou are biologically programmed to detect it. While in other regions of the world, such as Africa, migration is a race to escape drought. Here, the movement responds to a different combination, leaving behind areas that lose food quality and reaching territories where spring arrives later and is cooler, delaying the depletion of resources. But it's not just food that determines the outcome. Insect pressure is another decisive factor in this ecosystem. As the snow melts, large populations of mosquitoes, black flies, and midges emerge, becoming a constant and debilitating nuisance to the caribou within weeks. These insects don't just irritate and exhaust the animals, they also compromise their health by reducing their feeding and resting time, so migrating to coastal, windier areas in the north is, in part, a strategy to escape this threat. That same urgency is intensified by another unavoidable requirement. Pregnant females must reach the coastal plains of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, where they give birth. What they find there is crucially important. The open visibility helps them spot predators, and the tender vegetation that sprouts after the snowmelt is essential for milk production. Being late means reaching pastures that have already been exploited. The young lose the time they need to strengthen before returning south. With so much pressure mounting, the moment of departure ceases to be a choice and becomes an inevitable response. How does a herd of hundreds of thousands of individuals know when it's time to begin the journey? The signs are subtle but unmistakable. The moment before the departure sees a gradual change in the pack's behavior. Groups that had previously remained separate begin to draw closer, following traditional routes that have been traveled for generations. In the bay, animal density increases, and in the busiest areas, the snow and ice are worn down by constant movement. There is an air of restlessness in the collective behavior. Faster paces, longer journeys during the day, and a general northward direction. Males and females, young and old, join together in the same flow, driven by a common instinct. A journey of more than 1,500 kilometers to the Arctic awaits them, crossing rivers, mountains, and vast plains on a journey that not everyone will be able to complete. They don't advance blindly. A collective memory guides the herd through valleys, mountain passes, and rivers that act as landmarks. The sun, low but constant, sets the course, while the Earth's magnetic field completes that invisible compass. Although they travel in a vast formation of around 15,000 animals, they do not march as a compact block. Smaller groups separate to feed and rejoin, maintaining a continuous flow towards the north. In one of these pauses, a solitary figure appears in the distance. A wolf, standing on a small promontory, silently observing. Her mere presence brings part of the pack to a standstill. Heads snap up in unison, ears swiveling in her direction. Some steps freeze and the flow fragments. The predator advances a few meters, gauging the reaction, but the mass of bodies and the accumulated tension seem to deter him. After a few seconds of charged stillness, he turns and disappears into the bushes, leaving behind an echo of alertness that takes a while to dissipate. Their brief appearance is an unmistakable reminder. The path will be marked not only by cold and exhaustion, but also by the constant presence of predators, now more alert than ever to the incessant movement of prey across the territory. The advance resumes cautiously, first in short waves and then with a firmer pace, as if tension still hung in the air. The murmur of hooves on the damp earth replaces the expectant silence, and the formation stretches north once more. In the early days, progress, though steady, is slow. The forested ground soon gives way to transition zones where thawing snow transforms the land into treacherous mudflats. Each step requires additional effort. The youngest and pregnant females must navigate deep pools and fast-flowing currents that overflow small channels. The rivers, swollen by melting, carry blocks of ice that spin and crash against each other, turning each crossing into a moment of tension for the entire herd. The passage of time is evident in the wear and tear. Several days have passed and more than 100 kilometers have been traveled, with journeys that don't exceed 30 kilometers. The damp ground soaks their pores, weakening their skin, and the cold wind still cuts their ears. The pace, however, remains steady. The pack advances, although at the end of each day their strength is carefully assessed. As darkness falls, the group retreats to a clear stretch of the plain, an open space where the horizon stretches unobstructed and the view can anticipate any movement. There, the bodies are grouped together, shoulder to shoulder, forming a living wall that retains heat and makes it difficult for predators to approach. In the outer ring, some remain upright, twitching their ears at the slightest rustle, listening to the air that brings invisible news. Further inside, most close their eyes, letting the day's fatigue weigh on their muscles. Even so, vigilance is never complete, nor is there complete rest. Positions alternate almost imperceptibly, and some sleep with one eye half open, ready to react if the wind changes or the ground transmits a strange vibration. That same wind sweeps across the plain with a constant hiss, stirring the strands of fur and carrying with it hazy scents that mingle with the humidity of the nearby river. The murmur of the water accompanies the stillness and lulls the senses, but it doesn't completely erase the latent tension. Nothing seems to disturb the night, yet at the dark edge of the forest, something slithers. The caribou are not alone. A distant presence, patient and silent, watches from the shadows. Against the wind, close to the dark line of the trees, the wolves have been following a fresh trail for hours. 8 shadows move across the plain, merging into the gloom. The dominant male advances first. At his side, a veteran female sets the pace. Behind them, 3 seasoned hunters and 3 still clumsy youngsters imitate each gesture with the precision dictated by instinct. They don't break the silence. They stop when the wind changes, duck behind a bush and cross a stream in a shallow area that allows them to pass quickly and quietly. The terrain offers them folds and shadows that they use to erase their silhouette. Every meter gained reduces the distance with the pack. They don't speed up or improvise. They advance with measured steps, alert to any change in the air or in the movement of their prey. They don't seek open confrontation. Their strength lies in the silent selection of their prey. Among the bodies pressed together and at rest, the trained eye distinguishes the one breathing most labored, the one rising slowly. The target who, if night favors, will be the first to fall, but the calm doesn't last. A creaking noise breaks the balance. A wolf steps on a dry branch and the sound resonates like an explosion in the night's silence. A caribou on lookout, head erect, intercepts the vibration and lets out a short, loud snort, an unmistakable signal that danger is imminent. Within seconds, the mass is in motion. The stampede is immediate and chaotic. Thousands of hooves pound the ground as the air thickens with dust and steam, and bodies scatter in multiple directions, seeking cover. Many cross the edge of the forest as a first reflex, trying to break the attack line. Others climb towards slopes where the shadows allow them to disappear. But not all of them flee. A group of males remains in the open space, forming a line of defense between the wolves and the females, the cubs and the pregnant females. Their horns rise like barriers, their bodies weigh down on firm legs. They face the enemy, sizing up, showing combat intent. There are no grandiloquent vocalizations, no drama. These are millimetric protective maneuvers. They know that their presence can deter a frontal assault, but they also understand the reality of the night and the brutal statistics of migration. An individual sacrifice can save many. The wolves adjust their tactics. While 2 individuals simulate a frontal advance, the rest deploy in a semicircle to isolate the pup that was left behind while trying to get back up. The alpha male coordinates with brief, precise gestures, a movement to advance, another to stop, a look that orders to close the way. They avoid collisions with larger males. Their goal is to separate the most vulnerable prey. The strategy works. The main pack retreats with the pregnant female and the remaining offspring while the defending males cover their escape. Within seconds, the defense is broken. The cub is left alone in the moonlight. The males still try to block the wolves, but the predator's numbers and coordination prevail. Two wolves close the encirclement, leap with precision, and bite the neck and torso. The capture is quick. They finish early to prevent the larger adults from intervening. The end comes in minutes. The alpha female secures her prey with a firm, breathtaking bite. For a moment, everything remains motionless. Then, as if dictated by a silent rule, the others approach in order. There is no fighting. Each one knows when it's his turn. They form a semicircle and begin to tear at each other with measured speed. The steam from the hot flesh mingles with the white breath of the night. In the distance, the caribou herd resumes its advance. They don't look back. The road is still open, and the priority is to get away before nightfall offers new opportunities to the forest hunters. In these northern lands, enemies don't announce their presence. They lurk in the shadows, behind a fallen log or under the shade of a fir tree, silent as the snow that muffles every footstep. Here, danger doesn't always come running. Sometimes it just waits. But what happens when that danger doesn't have to chase its prey but finds it on its own, exhausted at the end of the line? At the tail end of the march, the story is different from that at the front. The strongest and youngest animals advance at a good pace, while behind them the air becomes denser and slower. The old, the sick, and those burdened by a time-constrained pregnancy lose meters every hour. Migration doesn't proceed in a straight line, but rather like a stretched rope. At its far end, the tension is greatest, and any weak link can give way. It is there, on that silent border between life and death, where he appears. At first, only a faint movement is discernible at the edge of the snow, almost invisible. His body remains low, his ears pricked, his steps measured. No one hears him coming because he doesn't need to run. His strength isn't in muscle or in his charge, it's in his patience. It moves along low bushes and snowy rocks, stopping at every shadow the terrain offers. Its thick, white, mottled fur blends in with the snow and ice, making it almost invisible to both caribou and other competitors. Thanks to its abundant winter fur, which insulates it from the wind and retains heat, it can remain motionless for hours, crouching while waiting for the right moment to approach. The Yukon Arctic fox is a specialist at finding opportunities. It doesn't seek prey that requires excessive energy expenditure, but rather exhausted animals or carcasses that the tundra has already claimed. This time, his sense of smell has led him to a sick adult caribou. He remains standing, but his legs tremble with each step, and his breathing is a fragile thread that chills in the wind. Hours later, the animal collapses in the snow without making a sound. The fox moves forward cautiously, sniffing the air and running its snout over the body until it finds a soft spot near the belly. The heat still trapped beneath the skin softens the flesh, and his teeth quickly open it. He begins to work with precision, peeling off strips of warm muscle that he chews slowly. It eats just enough, following the invisible rules of the tundra, aware that other scavengers will soon appear. Before moving away, it drags a piece into the soft snow and buries it, marking the spot with its scent. Then it disappears into the undulations of the terrain, seeking shelter from the wind. In this frozen world, the death of one fuels the life of many, and a few hundred meters away, migration continues. Over the past 7 days, the herd has covered hundreds of kilometers from its starting point in the low plains of the southern Yukon, following a steady northwesterly course. Their orientation is written into their genetic memory. The path of frozen rivers, the direction of the wind, and the tilt of the sun are cues they remember. This instinct also guides them in the brief, measured pauses they take in areas where the snow softens, allowing them to reach the lichens, mosses, and tender branches that grow close to the ground. There, the males break the frozen crust with their hooves, and the females and young take advantage of the exposed forage, eating just enough to resume their journey. But they can't stay too long. On the tundra, a caribou that straggles behind soon becomes part of a predator's menu, and the herd knows this without needing to learn it. It's a truth passed on with every migration. Therefore, in these improvised clearings, the organization is no coincidence. The strongest adults surround the young, while pregnant females occupy the center, where the risk is lower. There is no rigid hierarchy as in other species, but rather a silent strategy of mutual protection, repeated generation after generation. However, this compact structure cannot always be maintained. As the terrain undulates and the snow hardens, the pace of those behind becomes irregular. Some move forward to reach better foraging areas, others are forced to slow down to conserve energy. The formation stretches, leaving the rear guard more exposed, and every meter gained requires the accumulated effort of weeks of marching. Somewhere on the horizon, where winter begins to surrender, the breeding grounds await. Will they find there what they have sought for thousands of steps? The herd emerges over the tundra horizon after weeks of uninterrupted marching. They arrive not at an untouched paradise, but at a fragmented terrain with patches of young grass interspersed with meltwater puddles, marshy strips and small areas of dry soil scattered across the landscape. In the heart of this area, where the land drains quickly and visibility is open in all directions, are the areas preferred by females for giving birth. There are few of them, and this scarcity marks the distribution and competition for territory from the beginning. The long journey, which has spanned thousands of kilometers and several weeks of walking, thus leads to a scenario where space and the most valuable resources are short-lived, and where each new step is guided by the urgency of finding the right place. This urgency translates into immediate movement. Females that stray from the main mass explore slight elevations, river terraces and patches where vegetation sprouts earlier and the ground remains firm. From there, the horizon stretches out unhindered, and every movement can be seen from a great distance. This width is vital because a newborn calf has a better chance of survival if the mother detects the presence of predators in time. With that need in mind, the females carefully examine every corner, sniffing the ground, testing its firmness with their paws, and plucking small tufts of grass to check for moisture. However, not all areas meet these conditions, and the best plots are limited to a few scattered spaces. In such a highly contested terrain, encounters between individuals are inevitable and, with them, friction. But what happens when two or more people are looking for the same place in such a limited territory? Tensions first arise at these meeting points. The largest males with the most developed horns tend to occupy the most protected areas, pushing out smaller rivals. Meanwhile, among females, competition takes another form. Those who arrive in better physical condition secure central positions for birth. The intensity of the disputes varies. It can range from simple lateral blocks to brief attacks when the provocation persists. In the most intense confrontations, superficial wounds and scrapes are observed, and in years of high density, it is not uncommon for some individuals to be forced to abandon a site to seek less safe alternatives. In this shift to peripheral areas, the most vulnerable caribou are exposed to a risk that does not stem from internal competition. From the timberline and brush corridors, a silent threat begins to unfold. Wolves reorganize their patrols, advancing with measured steps until they approach the areas of greatest concentration. There, their coordination translates into calculated attacks against isolated calves or weakened individuals. If the pack tries to seek refuge on the banks, another danger awaits them. The bears patiently occupy strategic crossings where the terrain forces everyone to narrow their path. And while attention is focused on the ground, from above, the shadows of raptors glide across the tundra, tirelessly tracking the newborns. Further out on the margins, opportunists lurk, ready to take advantage of any unguarded moment. This constant pressure increases calf mortality in adverse conditions and demonstrates that arrival in these Yukon lands does not mean rest. On the contrary, each dawn opens a new front of threats, visible or hidden. The caribou remain in a state of constant alert, their senses always on high alert. The vast and luminous tundra becomes a board where each step can bring them closer to life or death. Amidst this uncertain scenario, the reproductive cycle continues its course, as if the urgency of perpetuating the species ignored the constant risk that surrounds it. This impulse is reflected in reproductive dynamics. Copulations occur in autumn, at the height of the mating season, and arrival at the breeding grounds represents the culmination of this synchronicity. Only a fraction of the males successfully mate. Those displaced or those who failed to find a mate group together separately, remaining on the outskirts of the herd. These individuals don't disappear. They maintain condition, foster resilience, and constitute a population reserve for future reproductive periods. Some will attempt opportunities in adjacent herds or in future years, but many will not achieve reproductive success in that cycle. This organization, in which females strengthen mutual protection and males maintain their competition, is not limited to the mating season. It also determines how roles and efforts are distributed once they reach the breeding grounds. In this social setting, physical recovery after the journey becomes an immediate and fragile task. Females divide their time between feeding their young and replenishing their reserves. They feed on tender salix leaves, reeds, and the first shoots of grasses and carex that appear on the tundra after the thaw. Males, when conditions permit, seek out lichens and expose areas of soil by breaking the crust with their hooves. Feeding breaks are short but frequent. While some females eat, others act as lookouts to reduce the risk of predation on young that are not yet able to run. This division of functions is a basic strategy for optimizing collective survival without hindering individual recovery. As the days lengthen and the landscape becomes covered with vegetation, the pack strengthens that balance between replenishing its strength and maintaining vigilance. However, that same effort is also a silent preparation for the next great movement, the one that will mark the close of the annual cycle, the return to the south. Months later, this trip raises new uncertainties. The areas abandoned at the beginning of spring may have changed. Some are recovering forage, others show signs of degradation from repeated use or climatic variations. Furthermore, the presence of other species or specific human pressure can modify resource availability. There's no guarantee that the southeastern landscape will be identical to the one they left behind. Migration, in that sense, isn't an operation that replaces exactly what was taken, but rather a cycle that redefines occupations and capabilities. Amidst all the tightly packed bodies of the already moving pack, two figures advance with a bond born in the darkness. That night, when wolves surrounded their paths and a life was left behind in the snow, they survived each day together, silently holding that absence. Now, at the end of the path, the male opens a gap in the damp moss while the female retreats. The wind brings a gentle chill, almost foreign to the one that had pursued them for weeks. In an instant that the rest of the world seems not to notice, she bends, her back trembles, and between the warmth of her body and the whiteness of the ground, a new baby breathes for the first time. The little boy tries to stand up clumsily, but guided by an instinct older than any winter. They've arrived. They've left behind the shadow of loss, and with the promised land under their feet, have brought another life into the world. The herd continues moving forward, but in that corner of the Yukon, the story of this journey finds its answer. Survival wasn't the destination, it was the beginning. The beginning of a new season, of another life that will grow under the same sky that once threatened and now opens up as a promise. In the heart of the north, where every dawn is uncertain, a family begins again. But the Yukon's migrations don't end there. Beyond the plains and open tundra, among its relatives lives another subspecies that also obeys the instinct to leave, although it does so in a very different way. In the southern reaches of the territory, where boreal forests dominate the horizon, woodland caribou move without leaving much of a trace. Unlike the endless columns advancing across the open tundra, these animals move in small, almost invisible groups, gliding between shadows and clearings. Throughout the Yukon, there are no more than 6,000 to 8,000 individuals. Their journey covers much shorter distances, between 100 and 400 kilometers, but each step carries a risk as high as that faced by their northern relatives. At first glance, they appear more compact and robust than the porcupine caribou. Their shorter legs give them stability on uneven terrain. Their broad hooves, adapted to open like shovels, allow them to wade through swamps or root through hardened snow to reach hidden lichens. This physiognomy, designed to navigate in closed environments, is also reflected in the presence of the males, crowned with broad asymmetrical antlers, which they use both to scare off rivals and to push aside branches and leaves as they advance. Even their coloration, a mosaic of browns, ochres and greys, prolongs this adaptation, camouflaging them among the tree trunks and turning them into true ghosts of the forest. But that same dependence on trees is its Achilles heel. Unlike porcupine caribou, which on the open tundra rely on crowds to deter predators, woodland caribou are forced to move in small groups. There are no spring tides of bodies protecting one another here, only family units and small flocks, fragile in the face of constant pressure. The first to put them to the test are the wolves, who take advantage of the deep snow during the winter to close the gap and wear down the stragglers. They don't always need a prolonged pursuit. Sometimes it's enough to intercept a narrow passage or follow the trail of a weakened group for days to force the opportune moment. But it's when the ice gives way and the forest begins to throb again that the threat changes. With the arrival of spring, another hunter becomes their greatest nightmare, the grizzly bear. With an estimated population of 7,000 in the Yukon, these giants awaken from their slumber with a ferocious hunger, and the caribou's forested trails intersect with their own. Bears know every corner like the back of their paw, and in this territory, vegetation cover is their greatest ally. Low branches, bushes, and gentle hills offer perfect hiding places for ambushes. There, the line between safety and danger can vanish in a single instant. How long can calm last when the predator is already so close? That moment arrives for an adult caribou who has separated from the rest of his small group. He moves through the clearings of the boreal forest, searching for lichen, each step taking him a little further from the safety of the group. His head lowers as he brushes away the fine snow that still covers the ground. The forest, damp and dense, seems motionless, until a heavy silence falls over it, as if all life within it were holding its breath. Barely 20 meters away, hidden among a group of birches, a grizzly bear watches him. Its golden fur blends with the filtered light, and only its eyes, fixed and calculating, break the stillness, weighing every possibility before moving. Then, realizing that the distance and the wind are in his favor, he bursts through the branches and leaves. Its body, weighing more than 200 kilos, moves with unusual speed for its size, each stride devouring meters with terrifying ease. The caribou reacts and flees, dodging logs and bushes, but in the forest there is no room for long runs. Here the escape window is measured in seconds. The grizzly closes the distance. Its breathing and roar echo among the trunks, breaking the silence of the forest. In a few moments the chase is over. Amidst the tangled branches and the acrid smell of disturbed earth, the bear begins its feast, regaining the energy that hibernation has sapped from it. The forest, as always, falls silent again. After about 20 minutes of solitary feasting, its jaws and neck fur stained with blood, the grizzly bear slows down. He no longer tears with the same urgency. He chews with slow, almost ponderous movements, while his belly, swollen with ingested meat, shows that he has eaten more than enough. The silence of the boreal forest, barely broken by the crunching of bones under their jaws, is suddenly interrupted by a chorus of harsh croaks descending from the grey sky. Not one, not two, but dozens of crows, their black bodies silhouetted against the clouds, turning in precise circles. There is no chaos in their flight. They move like a machine oiled by centuries of practice. An individual breaks formation and launches itself at the bear's back, pecking rapidly. The grizzly reacts with a growl and turns its head, but the raven has already flapped its wings, rising out of reach. Others, taking advantage of the distraction, pounce on the corpse to tear off shreds of exposed flesh. It's a pattern of harassment and theft so meticulous it seems choreographed, because unlike other birds that act alone, Yukon ravens cooperate as a well-trained group, capable of planning and executing maneuvers that outsmart a mammal weighing several hundred pounds. They have waited for the exact moment with a patience that few species possess, knowing that with a full stomach, the bear will have less desire to face such persistent rivals. With a deep growl, the grizzly turns away and moves into the thicket. The fog and shadows of the forest engulf him, and his silhouette fades among the trunks. Only then, as if they had been holding their breath, dozens of crows descend on the corpse at once. In a matter of minutes, the flesh is ripped, torn and devoured with brutal efficiency, leaving only bones and tendons. Here in the Yukon, nothing goes to waste. A fallen carcass feeds predators and scavengers alike, from the imposing grizzly bear to the most opportunistic of crows. Hundreds of miles from where the crows claimed their feast, something moves in the gloom of a boreal forest. The recent warmth has awakened the waters, and a lone predator leaves its winter territory. Its footsteps, firm but silent, head toward a river that resonates in the distance. He does not walk at random. He knows that there, every summer, life is concentrated in abundance. The Yukon has changed. The months of ice and silence are over. The sun rises higher and the temperature approaches 20 degrees. The snow retreats toward the mountains, revealing green meadows and renewed forests. The air, once sharp and dry, now carries the buzzing of insects and the murmur of streams rushing toward the great rivers. In this new awakening, rivers like the Klondike flow freely, fed by melting snow. Amid their foam and swift currents, an ancient migration comes to life. From the depths of the Pacific, thousands of silver salmon swim upstream against the current. Every muscle in their bodies gleams and pulses with effort as they navigate rocks and leap through eddies, driven by a single purpose: to reach the calm waters where they were born to spawn. It is a journey that exhausts even the strongest, a cycle of life and death that sustains an entire ecosystem. Among the beneficiaries, a dark-furred hunter advances toward the shore with the calmness of one who dominates his territory. Each step sinks his claws into the damp earth, and his more than 150 kilos of muscle and reserves rest on firm paws. Under the glare of the sun reflected in the water, the shine of its snout and its powerful silhouette reveal one of the great protagonists of these waters, the black bear. Its eyes, fixed on the current, seem to measure the exact moment to act. It has no need to run or hide. The abundance of the river will give it its opportunity. Unlike the imposing brown giant that roams these same forests, this hunter is more discreet and agile. It doesn't need the overwhelming strength of the grizzly to prevail, because its advantage lies in the speed with which it moves through the undergrowth and in the precision of each charge when the current offers its reward. Smaller in size, but not in determination, the black bear has perfected the art of surviving in a shared territory, and its power remains undisputed. So when he finds the exact spot where the current narrows and the salmon must jump to move forward, he simply waits. For long minutes, he remains motionless, the water lapping against his front legs. His breathing is slow and measured, and every so often he tilts his head to follow the fleeting glimpse of an approaching fish. The salmon pass by just a few feet, and when the opportunity is perfect, the swipe arrives. A swift, precise movement that slices the surface in a sudden splash. Between its claws, a good-sized salmon writhes, its silver skin flashing in the sun. With a sharp movement, the bear lifts it out of the water and retreats to the shore. There, under the shade of a fir tree, it sinks its teeth into the fat and protein-rich meat. This diet is not a passing luxury, it is vital fuel to face the coming months, when abundance disappears and the forest once again falls asleep under the snow. Every bite is stored energy, every broken bone a guarantee of survival. After devouring a good portion of the fish, the bear lets the rest disappear into the current. This isn't out of waste, but because here in the Yukon, everything has its place. Eagles, foxes, and other scavengers benefit from what the river and its hunters leave behind. The bear, satisfied, slowly stands up. He shakes off the water soaking his fur and takes a few steps along the bank, staying close to the riverbed that provides him with food. The end of summer in the Yukon brings mild weather. The warm, humid air heralds the peak of the season's abundance. In open spaces along waterways, bears cross paths more frequently than in the wilderness, and these encounters aren't always peaceful. Amidst the constant murmur of the river and the buzzing of insects, a dark silhouette advances from the distance. He is a younger bear with a uniform coat and a still-growing body, but with enough confidence to believe he can challenge a veteran. The shore is strategic terrain, food is abundant, and the open field allows rivals to be quickly detected. A duel here not only decides who eats first, but who dominates. The shore is filled with tension. The young man stops a few meters away, while in front of him stands a veteran with broad shoulders and a powerful neck, old scars marking the skin beneath his fur. In the world of black bears, size and experience count for as much as claws. And this animal doesn't fight on impulse. It does so because it knows it can win. For a few seconds, neither of them advances. They measure each other with short steps, snorts and nods that trace an invisible circle on the shore. But in nature, patience has its limits. Neither is willing to give up ground, and every passing moment brings the inevitable moment closer. The first to break the tension is the young man, who lets out a short roar and lunges forward. The veteran responds with a deeper roar, a warning that is also a challenge. The impact is brutal. Rib against rib, tense muscles, claws seeking the face, bites closing on the neck. They push hard, kicking up dust and splashing water. The soft ground gives way beneath their feet, and for a moment they roll over, tangled in a mixture of grunts and gasps. The young man attempts a high kick, but the veteran blocks it with his shoulder and responds with a sharp blow to the side. The difference in strength begins to show. The young man takes a step back, then lunges again, but his attack loses power. A quick turn, a final push, and it's clear who rules these shores. Panting, the young man backs away. The veteran advances behind him, his steps firm and his gaze fixed, but stops halfway. He has decided that it is not worth wasting his energy. He knows that the challenger will not come close to the shore again. After this tough battle, he remains on the shore for a few seconds. Then, unhurriedly, he turns toward the thicket. He knows every invisible path that leads him to safe havens. There it will continue to feed. Every bite counts, because in a few weeks it will have to accumulate enough fat to face hibernation, a 7-month period of absolute fasting where this reserve will be its only sustenance. The fat will keep it alive, protect it from the cold, and sustain its body while it sleeps deep in its burrow. But as this beast disappears into gloom of the forest high above, another journey is underway. There, where clouds caress sharp ridges and bare rock cuts the horizon, moves a snow-white figure, Dall's sheep. This mammal, with its dense fur and horns curved in perfect spirals, is the living emblem of the Yukon mountains. Their migrations do not cover vast plains like those of the Caribou, but rather trace vertical routes, linking the highest peaks of Kluane National Park with the green valleys where fresh grass weaves through the rock. In the middle of summer, under a timid sun that barely warms the rock, small groups of 20 specimens begin the descent. Led by wise old females, they advance with the precision of a trained army, each hoof finding purchase in crevices invisible to the human eye. But despite the ease with which they navigate the terrain, the route is treacherous. A miscalculated step can mean falling into the void, and that's not the only danger. Here in this world of cliffs and slopes lurks a perfectly adapted predator, the Canada lynx. Its mottled coat, a mix of grey, cream and dark spots, camouflages it against the lingering snow and cold rock. They don't hunt like wolves, wearing down their prey in long chases. Their art is ambush. An adult male, with ears tipped with black brushes, waits motionless on a ledge, barely 20 meters from an advancing group of sheep. Her wide, padded paws muffle any sound, and her gaze fixes on a lagging calf struggling to keep up with its mother. The slope here is made of loose gravel, every stone a hazard. The cub slips, the rattling of the rocks alerts everyone, but the lynx has already moved. In a silent leap, he closes the distance. His claws, sharp as daggers, dig into the fragile back. The struggle lasts only a few seconds before they both roll down the slope in a cloud of dust and gravel. The mother lets out a high-pitched bleat, but she can't turn back. On these slopes, stopping is inviting a fall. The cub disappears alongside the lynx in the dust and gravel, and the group, without looking back, continues descending, driven by the urgency of reaching the valley. Below, the green becomes intense and the air warmer. For the survivors, this change means food and a brief respite, though not all of them get to see it. Because in the Yukon, every life gained seems to be paid for with another. And if up there the danger hides in the rock, what predator awaits when the mountains give way to the valleys? From the ridges of the Kluane, where Dall sheep defied gravity and lynx stalked, the scene descends to the valleys of the Yukon. There, in more open and fertile terrain, reigns a cunning and adaptable figure, the red fox. With some 5,000 individuals in the range, this canid is one of the most versatile predators in the north. Its fur, which turns a vibrant red in summer and becomes thicker and duller in winter, acts as a vivid camouflage against the ever-changing mosaic of the landscape. Its long, bushy tail is not only a symbol of poise and elegance. In the colder months, it becomes a makeshift blanket to cover its snout while sleeping, protecting it from the frost. Unlike other Yukon inhabitants, the red fox does not migrate. It endures the winter by remaining in its territory, adapting its diet to what the season offers. Small rodents, still moving under the snow. Carrion remains left by wolves or lynx, and at this time of year, a very special opportunity: migratory birds. Every fall, the Yukon sky becomes a southbound air corridor. Among its most impressive travelers is the Canada goose, a species whose presence is impossible to ignore. With populations reaching tens of thousands, their flocks adopt the characteristic V formation, optimizing flight effort. They originate from the Arctic regions of Canada and Alaska, and their destination is the temperate and coastal areas of the south where winters are less severe. However, the journey is not direct. At certain points, the geese must stop to rest, feed, and regain their strength. Teslin Lake, a body of water that in September becomes a temporary oasis for thousands of birds. Surrounded by wetlands and low grasslands, it offers tender grasses, seeds, and relative protection from large predators. But for the red fox, this place is a unique opportunity. Teslin Lake seems to float silently. Mist drifts over the water, barely interrupted by the rising sound of a chorus of squawks. From the horizon, a dark formation approaches, and in a matter of seconds the sky fills with wings. Geese descend in waves, breaking the surface of the water and spreading out along the shore in search of food. Among the nearby bushes, two amber eyes watch unblinkingly. The red fox, motionless, calculates its moment. Unlike a wolf or a bear, it cannot resort to brute force. Its strategy is cunning. It begins to move in a zigzag pattern, appearing and disappearing among the low vegetation. He is not looking for a frontal attack, but rather to ignite panic in the flock. The geese, exhausted after hours of flight, react with confusion. Some take flight hastily, others run toward the water. In that chaos, there is always someone left behind. A young goose, unable to gain altitude quickly, is caught halfway between the water and the safety of the air. The fox detects him and accelerates, dodging bushes and puddles with springy steps. With a precise leap, it knocks him down and sinks its fangs into his neck. The resistance lasts only a few seconds before the body becomes inert. Immediately, the fox begins plucking out feathers with sharp tugs, letting the wind swirl them around. Amid the down that accumulates in the grass, the warm flesh is exposed. Only then, after making sure there are no competitors nearby, does he grab the prey by the neck and drag it into the shade of the bushes to eat in peace. On the shore, the remaining flock reorganizes, uttering alarm calls before taking flight. They will soon resume their journey south, crossing miles of boreal forests and plains until they reach areas where winter doesn't freeze every breath. Lake Teslin will remain silent, interrupted only by the wind and the murmur of the water against the shore, until the next wave of travelers covers it again with their roar. The migration of these birds is not just a visual spectacle, it is part of the constant pulse of life in the Yukon, where each season redefines the rules. And for the red fox, it is confirmation that patience and ingenuity can turn the fleeting passage of thousands of wings into a unique opportunity, written in the silent language of survival. But the seasons don't dictate their rhythm only in the lowlands. The same melting snow that feeds the lakes and meadows begins a journey toward the peaks, marking routes and dangers in territories where cold is the law. And what happens when we follow this upward course to the domains sculpted by ancient ice? There, high in the Yukon, glaciers are not simply sleeping giants, they are tireless architects of the landscape, shaping routes, erasing paths, and forcing creatures to make decisions that could cost them their lives. In the height of summer, between July and August, the heat of the midnight sun begins to pierce its edges. The ice slowly gives way, releasing torrents of glacial water that fall like liquid blades, tearing away the bare rock and carrying sediment that turns the rivers a ghostly grey. These swift and treacherous currents cut through entire valleys, turning grasslands into mudflats and wetlands, and raising banks of fog that drift like ghosts over the tundra. The saturated and shifting terrain becomes an unstable puzzle that forces migration travelers to detour or risk crossing. In this hostile environment, one of the true titans of the Yukon appears, the moose. With some 70,000 individuals in the territory, it is a mammal shaped by the need to endure endless winters and relentless thaws. Males can grow to over 2.5 meters in length and weigh up to 600 kilos, with long, muscular legs designed for wading through deep water and moving across soft ground. Their broad, hard-edged hooves fan out like natural snowshoes, providing traction even on mud or freshly fallen snow. The thick, dark brown coat hides an undercoat of hollow hair that traps air, insulating against the damp chill that accompanies thawing. Its broad snout, with its ever-flaring nostrils, detects submerged vegetation in wetlands. Its powerful neck tears off tender branches from willows and poplars. The males sport impressive antlers, which at their peak reach up to 1.8 meters wide. Every year in spring, they grow covered by a velvety layer that nourishes the forming bone, and they fall off in winter after the intense mating season of September and October. Females, although hornless, are equally resilient, with slightly lighter bodies of about 400 kilos, but capable of dodging predators with surprising agility. Moose spend much of the summer moving between clearings, riverbanks, and wetland areas, following the progress of the thaw to take advantage of the fresh vegetation that emerges after the retreat of the ice. This pattern sometimes leads him to venture into terrain recently liberated by glaciers, places of breathtaking beauty but full of hidden dangers. Glacial water, though tempting as a food source, is a silent trap. Currents carry rocks, branches, and sediment with an invisible force that can surprise even the largest animals. Just one false step is enough to lose your balance, and in these waters the cold is as lethal as a predator. But can even a Yukon titan, molded to withstand ice and scarcity, overcome the invisible trap of thawing? In the silence, interrupted only by the roar of the water, a bull elk ventures into a valley freshly flooded by the melting Kaskawulsh Glacier. The icy water reaches his chest, and beneath the surface, stones, polished by centuries of ice, spin and shift, threatening to pull him down. From the shore, grey eyes follow him. A wolf, one of the 5,000 that inhabit the Yukon, waits with predatory patience. It doesn't attack immediately. It knows that water and current can wear down its prey better than any ambush. The moose struggles forward, fighting the cold that numbs its muscles and the invisible force pushing it downstream. For a moment, its foot slips on a rock, but the moose regains its balance and manages to reach the bank, panting, its fur soaked, its flanks heaving. The wolf finally advances, biting the air in a feint attack, seeking to provoke panic. The moose, far from retreating, plants its legs and lowers its head, showing its imposing antlers. With a low snort, he charges forward. The predator calculates its options and decides to retreat, melting back into the thicket. Panting and soaked, the moose resumes its path, leaving behind a trail of water and deep footprints in the mud. He hasn't won the battle, he's just postponed it. In the Yukon, sometimes the difference between life and death is decided in an instant. And today, that instant was on their side. But while on the shore life is fought blow by blow, beneath the surface of the rivers the same deadly game advances noiselessly. In the turbulent waters of the Alsek River, where the melting glaciers murmur their fury in August, the Arctic char begins its invisible journey. There is no thunder of hooves or squawking of flocks, only a silent exodus throbbing in the depths. With scales flashing green and orange in the filtered light, they leave the Yukon's mountain lakes to glide into salt estuaries, searching for food before winter seals their world beneath the ice. Their bodies, up to 80 centimeters long, are sculpted over millennia. Precise fins cut through the currents, and sensitive gills navigate the shift from fresh to salt water, an adaptation that sustains them in this unforgiving environment. But the river is not forgiving. The rapids, swollen by the melting ice, roar with eddies that drag algae and pebbles along, while the temperature fluctuates between biting cold and a slight summer relief, exhausting the trout on their journey of tens of kilometers. And where the water's force begins to subside, the threat changes shape. From the banks, where the reeds sway in the icy winds, the American mink stalks with meticulous patience. It's not a predator of brute strength, but of cunning. Its sinuous body, covered in water-repellent brown fur, moves like a liquid shadow, with lungs that withstand prolonged diving. He doesn't engage trout in open stretches of the river, where their speed would overwhelm him. Instead, he chooses shallow pools, where the current calms and the exhausted trout seek respite. Bubbles and floating leaves obscure their progress, while their sharp eyes track every movement. In an instant, a trout, its silver body gleaming against the gravel bed, stops. The mink, slipping between submerged roots, attacks with a sudden movement, its teeth digging into the flank of its prey. The trout writhes, its tail whipping the water in a burst of foam, but the mink, relentless, drags it toward the shore where the fight ends among wet stones. This confrontation is not a frenzy of speed, but a calculated ambush where the river itself becomes an accomplice of the hunter and executioner of the prey. But the current doesn't stop to celebrate victories or mourn losses. Just a few meters upstream, another drama begins to unfold. The Yukon air, thick with the metallic smell of cold water and the distant crackle of branches carried by the current, heralds a change in the landscape. Here, where the rivers seem to know no rest, the protagonist is not a migratory giant or a gaping predator, but a discreet and persistent engineer, the Canadian beaver. Although their world is rarely measured in hundreds of kilometers, their short journeys are just as crucial to their survival. Along the Pelly River, one individual makes his way against the current. Its stocky body, dense with muscle and fat, is a constant workhorse. Its tail, broad and flat like a paddle, serves both as a rudder and as a support when it stands on the shore. Each stroke is firm and calculated as her mouth clasps a freshly cut branch. This effort is no accident. It responds to an invisible calendar that dictates her every movement. In the Yukon, autumn is a clock that ticks faster than elsewhere. The aspens and willows that line the riverbanks are beginning to turn golden, and the nights are already taking on a wintry edge. For the beaver, every hour is critical. It needs to strengthen its dam before ice seals the river and forces it to rely solely on accumulated reserves. Every resource he possesses, from his strength to his teeth, is put at the service of this race against time. Its teeth, an intense orange hue due to their high iron content, are constantly being renewed, allowing it to make clean, precise cuts, separating branches with an efficiency that no human axe could match. The dams that beavers build aren't simple shelters. They're architectures capable of rewriting the water map. A well-placed collection of branches and mud can transform a rushing stream into a calm lagoon. It can flood meadows, create new wetlands, open opportunities for some species and close paths for others. Moose, caribou, and salmon have had to change their routes due to the work of these natural engineers. But the stability the beaver gains in its pond also brings a silent risk: the attention of predators who know that here, between calmer waters and open shores, their prey can be exposed. It is then that the Yukon sky reveals another of its actors, one as unexpected as it is lethal, the harpy eagle. It is an infrequent visitor to these latitudes, perhaps brought by the passing abundance of small and medium-sized prey. From the top of a pine tree, the bird's silhouette looks like a statue of absolute vigilance. Its claws, the size of human hands, can exert pressure capable of breaking bones as easily as a branch breaks under the weight of snow. The eagle's gaze is fixed, unchanging. Every movement of the beaver on the shore is measured and anticipated. The beaver, unaware of the looming threat, places the branch next to the dam and begins to push mud with its front paws. It's a brief moment, barely a blink, but enough. The eagle swoops down. Its wings cut through the air with a deep whistling sound, and the wind as it descends rattles the dry willow leaves. The beaver, alerted by an instinct that has saved its species for millennia, turns its head and dives. The eagle's talons graze its back, tearing off a tuft of fur that floats, dark and wet, in the current. The eagle soars, frustrated, losing itself once again among the cold air currents. The beaver emerges below, panting, its fur bristling, its heart racing. It hasn't lost its life, but it has gained an invisible scar. The certainty that in the Yukon no refuge is absolute, and that even the most persistent engineers must work under the shadow of a danger that can come from any direction, even from the sky. Thus, in this final act, the Yukon reveals its most honest face. A land where every creature, from the moose that braves glacial rivers to the beaver that builds dams, lives under the same implacable law. A land where adaptation is a daily battle, and where the line between survival and tragedy can depend on a split second, a flap of a wing, or the distant roar of a river that never stops changing. But in this cycle that grants no respite, the threat doesn't always come in the form of claws or fangs. Sometimes it arrives silently, in the change of light, in the cold breath that announces a new season. Autumn envelops the Yukon in a golden slanting light, painting the hillsides fiery red and burnt yellow. The poplars tremble with every gust of wind, and the reflection of the mountains in the lakes fragments into flashes. The days are getting shorter, the sun is moving across a lower arc, and in the early mornings the ice forms thin crusts on ponds and banks. Summer gives way, and with it, the whole territory is set in motion. It is the weather, with its unwavering calendar, that dictates the pace of each game. The steady drop in temperatures, the strengthening of the northern winds, and the first snowfalls on the peaks are signs that no creature can ignore. Here every species knows the urgency. Staying too long means facing an unforgiving winter. Across the open plains, endless masses of caribou move toward their winter refuges, their hooves pounding on the frozen ground. In the waters, salmon complete their journey against the current, leaving with each spawning the promise of a new generation. And in the sky, birds depart in precise formations toward the south, their wings beating in a final push before the air routes are closed by snow. At this time of transition, predators find their opportunity. Wolves lurk in narrow passages, detecting the slightest weakness in the herds. Bears take advantage of this last opportunity to store energy, launching themselves into rivers and meadows with an instinct honed by centuries of survival. Each attack is precise, timed to the vulnerability of those traveling exhausted. But in the Yukon, nothing is wasted. The scavengers arrive punctually, part of the same choreography, crows circling the remains, foxes stealthily prowling, eagles soaring high, ever vigilant. From what was once life, food is born for others, and thus the cycle closes. The tundra, the rivers, and the skies become a stage where abundance and scarcity alternate like seasons. Every departure feeds those who await, and every return heralds the restart of the wheel. Here, survival isn't an isolated event. It's a chain in which everyone depends on everyone else. The first snows fall on footprints that will soon be erased. Beneath the frozen surface, the rivers continue to flow. Above them, the wind sweeps the white peaks, and in this vastness, everything is ready to repeat itself. Because in the Yukon, every year, life begins anew, with the same strength and the same hardship that have shaped it from the beginning.